Hi, Jamie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here today. So, I always like to give my guests the opportunity to introduce themselves to the listening and watching audience in their own words and in their own terms about who they are and what they do.
I was born with a knowing. I think that we all are. I stayed true to my knowing and was always very interested in psychology and went on to study. And I did psychotherapy for a while. Now I do something very, very different, which is assisting people in assisting themselves.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm excited to unpack that a little bit more with you through the interview. My second question is I always want to understand everybody's arc and journey through spirituality, religion, or nothing at all, and kind of walk us through your early childhood experience. Like most of us get plunked into something, or we don't start out with anything at all, but everyone that usually comes here has some sort of spiritual alignment or interest, or something has changed about their sort of relationship with the divine. So what was that journey like for you, if you feel comfortable to tell us your early childhood
Sure.
experience?
So we were raised as humanistic Jews. However, our parents were so open to us celebrating every single holiday and understanding and embracing every single religion. And so that was really a gift for us, I think, to feel that we had the freedom to explore it all and to really kind of align ourselves with what resonated with us individually. But the message always was all inclusiveness, love everybody, despite of whatever their particular religion, race, color, whatever. So that was a wonderful opportunity, I think, growing up for us in a family.
Yeah, that all inclusion is not usually taught in a lot of religious
No.
experience in the Western world. Me particularly, for sure. I always tell people on the podcast, like, I was taught who to hate first in my religious experience, and then who to love. It wasn't like the inverse.
Yeah, and that's really challenging. I
Hmm.
think as we get older, when we figure out that maybe that message didn't serve us.
Yes, yeah. And it's strange to think about stripping away shared humanity when, like, most religions are built and the ideas are built on our shared humanity and like being connected and helping one another. So you don't understand. I don't think you do when you're young. You don't understand the contradiction until you get the awareness, like most of us do. So I love that. I love that inclusion was part of it. So we're here to talk about your work, but also to talk about your book. You wrote this beautiful book co-authored with Lauren Tard called The Ever Essence Loving of You. I wonder, just as a baseline, maybe let's tell the audience what this book was about and what its intentions are. And then I have a few questions about the book itself for you.
Okay. So when I was growing up, my biggest struggle was being very connected to myself, but not having this connection with my mom, this person that brought me into the world. And it was really confusing for me.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, I always maintained my connection with myself and in many ways felt like that's all I had was me. So I learned at a very early age to turn inward for guidance for everything, which is quite a gift, I have to say now. But um, it took me half my life to figure this out. And when my mom was intubated and in the ICU, I sat with her for a very long time and felt all the love pour out of her to me and thought, oh my goodness, this is the beginning of
Mm.
our mother and daughter relationship, what I've always wanted, this amazing connection. And then she transitioned. And when she did, I really understood that we cannot be connected to others unless we're connected to ourselves. And my mother, who was a force of nature and just an amazing human, sidestepped that opportunity her whole life
Mm.
to explore and to um, have the connection with herself. And therefore, there was not a possibility that we, mother and daughter, could have that connection with one another. So I sat down with my good friend who's known my mother for a very long time. Um, and we wrote this book because the message is that the most important relationship that we have is the one with ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
then if we choose to go on and connect with others, then that is a wonderful thing. But there is no connection with another until we are choosing to explore and to connect and to create that within ourselves for ourselves. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what the book is about, tribute to her, and it is the ever loving essence of you. That's the name of the book. So yeah, it was quite a gift.
Yeah, wow. And I think you're speaking to so many like universal truths that some of us experience, like our mother wound, the disconnection of self, the like, trying to reconnect the relationship to self. There's so many universal themes in what you said there that I think affects a lot of us. And I love that when she transitioned, that she emptied some of herself into you so that you could feel an experience. And I really appreciate you sharing that. So thank you for going into that detail. That's really, really beautiful. So in the line of the book, I obviously caught on to the connecting with the inner guidance and inner being. It's definitely something I've had to work as well, because we definitely grow up in a society that tells us to like externally seek constantly. I wondered, in terms of the integralness of interconnection, where do you see self-trust? I would kind of put it as a high priority, but if we're trying to build that inner guidance system and our connection to inner being, how important is it for us to have self-trust before we even go on that journey?
If we could remember a time when we knew for ourselves, we didn't know how we knew or why we knew, but we just knew. And then we chose not to listen to ourselves. I think that we could come up with a million examples,
Mm-hmm.
because I've never heard anyone say, I should not have listened to myself. But I hear people all the time saying, I should have listened to myself.
Yes.
And just bringing those examples up for ourselves, I think we begin to trust, because we knew, we didn't know how or why, and then we chose not to listen. But had we chose to listen and trusted ourselves, the outcome would have been different. So I think inherently we do trust ourselves, but we are trained from such an early age to look outside of ourselves, like you said, to
Mm-hmm.
seek outside, that we forget that we are our own greatest resource. But who would know better for us than us? There's nobody. So I think that we have the ability to go back and to say, yes, I could have trusted myself. I can trust myself. And now I can make a choice. Do I want to trust myself and listen to my inner guidance, or am I choosing to hear it and make a different decision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and where do you see for yourself? Obviously, we have like the generalization of the influence from our society, but is there anything you can point to particularly that you see the erosion of our self-trust that happens early in our lives, like, or the genesis of it? Like, what have you discovered on your journey of where that sort of starts for each one of us?
I think it starts very young, because I think children always know for themselves, and then we're always being corrected. And usually our correction is coming from a parent or a teacher or somebody that doesn't trust themselves.
Yes.
So, fortunately, I was in a situation where I didn't have that oversight. So, it really encouraged me to look within and trust myself. And I pushed a lot against authority. There wasn't a lot to push against at home. My parents were very allowing, but authority, if someone thought they knew better for me than me, no way. Like, I know better for me. And as a child, to say that outside of the home, I think that was really like confusing,
Mm-hmm.
for adults and for people in authoritative positions. But once again, I think it is the people that don't trust themselves, that don't allow their children, their students, their peers to trust themselves. It's a projection. If you don't trust yourself, you're not going to want to hear somebody telling you that they know best for themselves.
Yeah. And those projections are usually caught up in some sort of life mistake and story that the other person has told themselves, that they're trying
Yes,
to prevent the child or the
exactly.
person they want to influence, right? Like, it's all
Exactly.
embedded in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's all very subtle.
Yes. It's really sneaky, because you could go your entire life not really recognizing the course correction, which is what you're saying there, that subtle course correction that is usually stoked in fear and
Yes.
seeped in fear for
Yes.
not wanting to have somebody take that path again. I really love that you said that. I think that's super spot on.
And we really can't blame parents because they want the best for us, but I
Yes.
don't think they understand that when you are telling your children you know better for them than they know for themselves, that you're training them to look outside of themselves every single moment instead of looking within. And looking within is really one of the most powerful resources that we have.
Yeah, there's just so many layers there to unpack, but we'll have to leave it there because I have a couple more questions here related to the book. One of the things you both talk about in the book is, our internal dialogue and the stories we're telling ourselves. And one thing that I was very struck by in the book that I think is a beautiful practice to keep, get ourselves out of the circular tape playing in our mind with our inner dialogue is like not revisiting the past too much. And you guys go into really specific detail about like when is it appropriate to revisit your past? When is it not? When does it become not useful to your own progress and expansion? So I wondered if you could maybe break that apart for the audience a little bit and tell them why is it important to revisit our past but not get stuck there? And then what is the link between going back and letting go? So it's kind of a two-part question
Sure,
there.
yeah.
Answer it however you feel you want to there.
So I ask people if they want to look back from your right now adult perspective. Because as you look back now, you see it all very differently. And it will have something to do with your now. But when we look back as children, it really gets big and takes on a life of its own and does not serve us. There is no purpose for that. So if we could look back as an adult and understand from our adult perspective what happened back then I think our understanding of it in our now could be helpful.
Hmm.
But if it's not helpful, I do not believe that we need to look back in order to move forward because it doesn't really matter what happened then. What is important is where are you in your now and where are you wanting to go?
Hmm.
And so much of that, I think, is new for people to hear because they just assume that they need to like look back, drag all that old stuff up in order to move forward. And it's just not the case. It doesn't serve us. And
Hmm.
it really doesn't have a place in our now as we are adults. I think also the idea to move forward allows us to forgive forgive ourselves, forgive whoever those people were, just forgive in general. And forgiveness is really a bridge to love
Hmm.
and allows us, it really sets us free.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is helpful.
And the connection between the letting go when you're revisiting the past or you're moving forward, how important is it to cultivate that practice of just, I think also too, we just get really stuck with holding on to things. Like I'll speak from my personal experience. Like you're right. When you go back and you look at things, it feels so big and so hard. And so like, and sometimes you want validation or an apology. You can't really get that sometimes with the people in your life. And so you cling to this thing, right? Without really releasing it or even allowing, yourself to forgive yourself and forgive others. So when we think about the letting go aspect of not staying stuck in the past, what can you offer people who are struggling with that right now?
I think there's one question to ask yourself. Is this serving me in my now?
Hmm.
And if it's not serving you, don't let it go completely, but maybe just set it aside. Not that you won't pick it up again, but for this moment, set it aside and look forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I did want to also ask you, there was this really beautiful chapter in the book about deliberate creation, which I think like once you tackle all of the past and whatever it is you're working through to expand and you're what you are both talking about in the book is a really alchemic process of like never discarding anything, but using it to fuel your own growth and expansion. And it's a really beautiful idea to have. And most everyone that comes here has that same idea, is doing that same work. I'm still doing that work every single day. But there was this chapter on deliberate creation. And I wondered if you could tell me a little bit more about that and how, being a deliberate creator allows us to stay empowered and inspired and create a beautiful life. And that's like the difference between everything, I think. Like realizing at some point I am so responsible for like every single moment that unfolds in my life if I am intentionally and paying attention to the deliberate life that I'm trying to create here. Can you sort of tell the audience your all's idea on that in the
Sure.
book?
I think the question that most people spend their whole life avoiding is, what is it that you're wanting for yourself? First of all, most people don't even know that they're allowed to ask themselves that question. Um, but when we entertain the notion that if we could identify what we would like for ourselves, even if it is in this moment, the idea of identifying it opens the door to creating. So it's a big question. I think the most important thing is, what are you wanting for yourself in this moment? And it's moment by moment. We want different things every single moment. And then the idea that we are responsible for creating what we're wanting, and it's all possible.
Mm-hmm.
What we think about is what we create. And most people think about what they don't want all day long. And what do they have? What they don't want.
Yeah.
So when we begin to understand that, first identifying in this moment what you want, and then putting your mind and your attention on only that, then you're able to deliberately create a moment. And a moment feels really good when you have stepped into your personal responsibility and realized it's totally up to you to create it or not. It's not up to one other person, which really means you're free. You're not
Mm-hmm.
dependent on one other person to create deliberately the life that you are wanting for yourself. Now, we can't create for other people, but we can create for ourselves. And it's interesting. We want to create for other people all day long. We want to tell
Yeah.
people all day long what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what they could do. And literally, it's none of our business. What we're paralyzed in. What do we want for ourselves, and how can we create it for ourselves? Step into our personal power, take personal responsibility, and really understand that our world is our oyster. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
can create anything deliberately.
Minding your business is like a spiritual practice, I've learned.
Truly. I mean, yes, it is.
I've had lots of people come on here and say that as well, and I think
Yeah,
it's an absolutely a spiritual practice.
it definitely serves us well.
Yeah, it does. And we all get so caught up in, and it's so much easier to see other people's perspective because we don't, or what's going on in their life because we don't have as much, skin in the game, and there's more clarity there because we're so close to ourselves. So you want to sort of intervene, and then it's like, well, just if you mind your own business, like you can do your own thing. I did have, in terms of the book, one more question here to sort of pull it all together, and especially with the work you do with your integrative work. I wondered, as we're going through this journey through personal development and loving ourselves and coming home to ourselves and looking to ourselves for the guidance and for the intelligence within ourselves to make the best decisions for our lives and all of this, how important is it for us to get to a place where we are integrating fully and not, taking a microscopic view or an overly reflective view of our development? Because I think it can get to that point where then you're trying to look at every little thing and overly having a contemplative practice of something, and then that sort of takes you into another place where then you never get to feel, I would say, like the sweetness of integration. So do you have anything to say about that here?
When we are loving ourselves and feeling connected to ourselves, we are comfortable in our own skin. And that feels really, really good. We are not up in our head analyzing anything. We are trusting how we're feeling about ourselves. And usually, if it's good, then our eye is so much kinder to others.
Yeah.
There's something very reassuring about being around people who are comfortable in their own skin. So I think that's the goal. It's not to analyze every single moment what you're doing. It's to relax into who you are, trust who you are, and really kind of have fun with how good it feels to move about the world in such a place where you're not in judgment with yourself or of others. And that just opens the door into this sense of like feeling at ease. feeling at ease with yourself, feeling at ease with others, and not necessarily having to like monitor your every thought,
Yeah.
your every action. It's none of that. Coming home to yourself is quite a natural process. And I think it feels really good when we can relax into that. Trust ourselves and trust other people. Whatever choices someone else is making for themselves, good for them. Like, how nice is that?
Mm-hmm.
So, none of this stuff is hard. I don't think that it takes a lot of work. And I think sometimes we know what we need for ourselves and we just make a choice not to do it. And that's
Yeah.
okay too. Give
Or we
yourself
overcomplicate
permission.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like ridiculous. It's about being in a moment and the next moment. But
Mm-hmm.
when we were growing up, there were never consequences for our mistakes. It was an outcome. So we really got to feel comfortable with making a choice and knowing if that's not a good choice, well, then just make another choice. It's like
Mm-hmm.
not a big deal. And to sit
Yes.
and to hold ourselves in a, punitively or to punish ourselves or to, you know, none of that is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Criticize or none of that. So the
Mm-hmm.
question I think repeatedly is this serving me in my now? And if it's not, but you're choosing to hang on to it, that's okay. You are choosing that. You're not a victim. There is power in saying, I'm choosing to like be very upset with myself, even though it's not serving me. Okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. You are choosing it. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think the punitive nature, it harkens back to our, just like the Venn diagram of Western religion, especially here in the U.S. Like every mistake is a punitive equivalent, and so, and then if you overlay that with a contemplative religious practice, then you're constantly beating yourself up and being hard on yourself. You know, and people do this without even realizing there's that connection, because you don't have to even have a deep religious experience, but this is like what's taught here. And I love that it's so profound. I love that you just said that it's the mistake. What did you say? Something like it's just an outcome. It's not,
It's an outcome. There's no consequence. And
there's
then you
no
move on to the,
consequence.
no, then you just move on to the next decision and a different outcome.
Ugh, I love that. That's beautiful and super profound. It took me a long time to get there as well too, because of my religious upbringing. That I often, the thing that you were talking about back there too was all of the self imprisonment that we do, and the idea that like we're stuck, or that there's not an option out, and really it is as something, unless it's like dire situations when you're like in an abusive relationship or, something like this, you know, it is the difference between like, do you have a decision here? What decision can be made? And can you move yourself forward and, go through the next
But
piece?
I believe even in an abusive relationship, you
Mm-hmm.
can know and still choose not to do something. And as long as you internalize that you have made a choice, there
I
is
see.
freedom in it. You're not
Yeah.
a victim to any relationship, but you're choosing to stay where you are because you're not ready to do something different. That
Yeah.
is very different than feeling like you are a victim to
Yes.
anything.
Yes, you're right. That nuance is everything. And is also, I think, an entry point to leave that kind of situation.
Yes,
Yeah.
when you're ready and you choose to.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think so many of us in our past and probably right now have known we needed to leave or change. And you're right. It comes down to us wanting to be ready. and and we have to also be gentle with ourselves if we're
Yes.
not ready too, because we can't
No.
pile on the punishment by, beating ourselves up for not leaving sooner, or taking a different decision, or being
Yes.
in a toxic work environment, or whatever that, fill in the blank wherever you are, if you're listening to this show and thinking like, oh, I know I'm not ready, but I should, maybe I need to think about this in a different way.
But I do believe that when we are ready, the time we've been where we have chosen to be has served us somehow. And in the end, that becomes a superpower for us.
Yes.
It becomes a
Yeah.
strength. It becomes something that we can feel really proud of.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question, because I did want to kind of really unpack a little bit more the alchemic journey of like the work that you do about not discarding everything. And I know that there are sometimes people who feel like if we accept everything that happens to us, this feels like spiritual bypassing or positivity, toxic positivity. So I wanted you to kind of speak to those skeptics who say like, you know, if you integrate all of these terrible things that have happened or the pain that's happened or work through everything and found usefulness in it or found a way to transmute it and transform it, you're not saying that all of those things were right or that you're just ignoring them. Like, what can you say to the skeptics out there that might be confused about the difference between toxic positivity, and the alchemic journey if we're transforming and transmuting this work?
I think the goal of all of this work is get to a place where you feel good. That's it. There's nothing more than getting to a place where you can take a big deep breath and feel really good about who you are and where you've come from. However you can do that, it doesn't matter. It's different for every person. A lot of people have built their entire identity around what has happened to them when they were young.
Yeah.
And our society rewards that. We are not interested in hearing stories about how well people are doing. We want to hear about how horrible things were. We want to hear about how much someone struggled there's so much power for the outside when we are in struggle. And yet there's no power in struggle. And there's no need to take that and move it to your now. You can just set that aside and reframe it. That was a struggle. And out of that struggle, once again, there is an amazing strength. Focus on the strength. I mean, at the end of the day, the greatest gift to us is if we can go back and thank all those people in our life that created opportunities for us to really find ourselves and know ourselves. And some of that was really painful. But without that, we would not be who we are today.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting too when we experience like a painful situation that it also helps us make better decisions in the future. And sometimes we don't really think about it like that when we're so close to it. But I feel like it does give us it gives us more wisdom, which I think you talk a lot about in the work that you do, is like it creates a well of wisdom for us to choose better, to practice our strength and resilience, and to be, I think, more in our power every time we choose differently.
Yes. And for most of us, we can go back and say we knew so many things about ourselves back then. I mean, we just knew. Maybe we couldn't do anything about it, but we knew that. Of course, you knew, and you know now.
Yeah. We can't hide from ourselves, even though we really like to.
I mean, the funny thing is, we can go our whole life and sidestep the relationship with ourselves, but why? We are our own greatest resource. We are our own best friend. We are, when we turn inward, it really is like coming home. It feels good.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, I'm going to take a hard left turn here from the book and I want to talk little bit about you and the work that you do. And something you mentioned on your website that I thought was just delightful is that you said something about being in your third life, in your third act. And I wondered if you could maybe expound on that a little bit and tell us from the vantage point of being a woman and aging and where our society says, we have a shelf life with what we can do and things like that. But we're not done. And I think we get better as we age. I know I certainly am. I feel like you couldn't pay me to go back to my 20s. So when you think about that third life, I wondered, I'm just curious, what is your third life? What is going on in your third life act here?
Well, now I'm in my fourth life.
Okay, your fourth life. Okay.
Yes. I think women are masters at reinventing themselves. We are just unbelievable what we can do. And most of it's unconscious. Like we just take on so many different roles and we adapt so well. However, we tend to leave ourselves behind. So the most important thing is how can we nourish and nurture ourselves to the point that when we take on all these roles, we don't feel resentful. because I think women are notorious for being the caretakers of the world and really leaving themselves behind, and then feeling so resentful and so angry that, everybody else is where they are and they are where they are because they put in all this time and energy and work into other people and blah, 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 blah. No.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think as we get older, there is so much opportunity to reinvest in ourselves first and foremost so that we can reinvent ourselves and move along. Children who leave the home, they go to college, and then women sit and they're like, now what? I've given my whole life to these children, and where am I at? And yet,
Yeah.
there are so many dreams that women have had and passions, but they've never entertained the thought that they could follow those things because there's so many layers of resentment around it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And so much unconsciousness in the making those decisions to begin with, like taking that path
yes.
of motherhood, or
Oftentimes, though, it's a choice so that we
mm-hmm.
don't have to address ourselves. We use it as an
Yes.
unconscious diversion. All of our relationships, whether they're with our children or with our spouses or our work or whatever. And, that's just not necessary. It feels
Mm-hmm.
really good to get to the place where you can focus on yourself and do something with yourself for yourself. And I think that that's such a great example for children to see,
Mm-hmm.
to see their mom doing something that, makes her really happy or something she's really good at that has nothing to do with the caretaking of the children.
Yeah.
But once again, it's not the children's fault, but we use it as an excuse not to do these things for ourselves. So,
Mm-hmm.
I have grandchildren now. It's wonderful. It is the reward for being a parent. You really get to have such a different kind of responsibility with grandchildren. You play with them, you love them, and then they go home, you know and there's really something beautiful about that. But yeah, I think that there's no end to our ability to reinvent ourselves as women. I think we're amazing. We really are.
Yeah. And if you think about the rebirthing process, I mean, if you think about the entirety of a woman's life and rebirthing and reinventing herself, like how much would you say would be a good amount for us to be doing that? I know we can't technically put a number on it, but how often should we try to dive into that? Because that experience in and of itself is really beautiful and life changing, and does allow us to. I think in the negative aspect, people would say like you're being selfish if you're reinventing or doing your own thing, right? Like that's the narrative that has been thrust upon us, which is not accurate. But that rebirth and that reinvention, how important is it for us to practice that throughout our lives?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It really is. I think that we have so many dreams and so many ideas about what we want for ourselves. And I think that we should follow those dreams and opportunities. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's no end. I mean, it's
No.
just, and there's so many amazing examples out there in the world of women that just continually reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
I think that men are a little more limited. They really are. I don't see this possibility so much with men.
Mm-hmm.
But with women, I think it's endless. We're
Yeah.
very powerful creators. Now, can we create for ourselves? That's the big question. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot create for other people. And if you think you've created for your children, you have not. You really have not. I think to invest in yourself is a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like the best thing we can do. And I just want to say, just echo what you said back there. I think, I grew up in a family where my mom did a lot of selfless work. So she was like working all the time, and then she was volunteering at a clinic for poor people in Juarez. And I never saw her do anything for herself. Like she never took care of herself. And if she did, she felt guilty about it. And I think it's like you said, it's so important for us as children to experience our parents, both male and female, nourishing and filling up their own well and resources internally so that we can practice that. Because as kids, we don't know that's what's happening because it's all we're all experiencing it, but not putting language or terms to it. We just know that's what's happening. And then we grow up and then we're like, why haven't I gotten myself a haircut? Or why haven't I taken some time off for myself? Or why am I so exhausted? Like, and why am I doing all these things for all these other people? And I've never taken care of myself. And it's just such a pervasive thing that sort of happens if we don't lead by example, right?
And self-care is so important. And self-care can be something as simple as 10 minutes in the morning, just to take time for yourself.
Yeah.
But they tell you when you get on an airplane, put your oxygen mask on first and then assist others. And it's such an important message. And it's so counterintuitive to women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is really counterintuitive. But we can't survive unless we put our own masks
clearly. On. And I think it feels so much better to assist people when you're wanting to assist them and you have something to give. People know when you're like have nothing left and you're giving to them. It doesn't feel good to them. I mean, it doesn't feel good to us. It doesn't feel good to them. It's just a lose-lose. So, I mean, what's the point?
Yeah. What is the point? It's a very good question. So I wanted to give you some space to talk about the independent work that you do outside of the book with your clients, and you're taking an integrative approach to well-being. What is it that you offer your clients? Like, how are you working with people? What is some of the work that you're doing in your little piece of the world?
So I offer them an opportunity to first and foremost take personal responsibility. Because in order to work with me, you have to go on the website and you have to contact me and then tell me how much time do you need for yourself. And that's so different than what
That is really different. Yeah.
Most people are telling them what they need. And I'm asking people, what is it that you need?
I love that.
How would I know? So it starts off with personal responsibility. And then it also starts off in such a way that you understand that this whole process is going to be you assisting yourself. I'm going to assist you, but you're going to assist yourself because you have all the power to do so. That's another message people are not ready to hear and they don't really understand. So it gets really fun because in this integrative approach to well-being, we laugh a lot. There is so much to laugh at what we do to ourselves, what we say to ourselves, what we think about ourselves. I mean, it could only be fun. And once again, nobody would talk to you the way you talk to you, and you would not talk to another human being the way you talk to yourself. So, I mean, I think once you begin to understand just how ridiculous it is, how we've set this whole situation up, then it's easy to turn it upside down on its head and to create something that feels really so it's a gentle, fun, lots of laughter approach to really just reinforcing and reassuring you that you can trust yourself, that you know for yourself. And I think it's a process that happens really fast. Like people don't stay with me very long, which is great because I'm in the business of wellness. When they figure out that, yes, in fact, they really do know, they really can trust themselves, they can guide themselves, they are there for themselves. I mean, so it's really fun for me to see how fast this works for people. I also have a service called the Quickie, which is a lovely texting option, which I love. And people text with me and I text back with them. And then they have this whole kind of transcript that they can go back to and read. And in the end, they realized that they really knew all the answers of all the questions they asked. And I was just the conduit for those answers to come through them. So it's very empowering, very reassuring, very fun, very light, a lot of levity. There's too much heaviness. We make such a big deal out of so many things unnecessarily. And once again, what is the goal? To feel good, to feel good about ourselves, to feel good about other people, to really be there in connected relationships that are fun and cooperative. And that's it.
Yeah.
There isn't much more than that.
Yeah, I love that approach. That's really innovative. And I love that you feel that it can be accelerated because you're putting them in the driver's seat, right? And so that it accelerates the process. I think probably I'm just guessing here. Um, if they're driving their own growth, um, and you're basically turning them in on themselves and saying like, here, let's go. You lead the way and I'm just the conduit. I think that's really, really beautiful. I also just wanted to check in with you. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on about your business or anything about the work that you do before we sort of get ready to wrap up here?
I would like to remind people that they have a choice of who they work with and that they should shop around and that they should gravitate to something that feels good to them and that to be wary of somebody that is the expert. We are all experts for ourselves. There is no expert for you. And I think we get caught in a trap sometimes and we end up in relationships with therapists that are not serving us.
Mm-hmm.
And we are afraid to find something different for ourselves. This process should feel good. And if it doesn't, you got to find some other way to do it because it can feel good and you can grow and thrive. And it's just important to remind people
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. You just reminded me of a thought I had back there too. I think, we just take ourselves so seriously. I definitely did when I went on my like spiritual awakening and homecoming. And this work is serious at times, but to also look at it, I think with a grain of salt and with like some humor towards yourself. And like also when you're in that process of unlearning things, it's so important to bring in that humor for softness to sort of round out the edges that you've created for yourself. And I love that you said that. I think that's really, really beautiful.
The other thing, too, I want to say is that you'll have a lot less friends when you do start to grow because you'll have a
Yes.
lot less drama in your life and people are not interested in really hearing how well you're doing.
No, thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's so one of the it's like the most paradoxical thing about going on this journey, how like you grow, but you outgrow people. And it's a really interesting.
And you can't want for them what they don't want for themselves. So when we begin to get this work and it's so fun, we want this for everybody,
Oh my
but we
God,
have
girl,
to
I wanted to
understand.
scream it from the rooftops to everybody and nobody wanted to listen.
No, people don't really want this for themselves. So we have to be careful. I mean, leading by example is perfect, but to think that everyone would like to join you, no.
That is so, I love that you said that is perfect. That's like a perfect way to wrap it all up because those are two universal truths that happen on this
Yes.
experience. Like nobody wants to hear how wonderful you're doing because they're usually in the muck of it. And then
Yes.
you will lose friends, which is like a painful but also necessary part of the process. And so I really love that you said that, Jamie. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to give you some space to tell everybody where they can find you online. I know your book is on Spotify, so I did want to ask you, aside from listening, how do you want people to engage with that book so that you guys get the most, can they buy it as well? Like,
Yes.
what do you want
No,
us to do?
it is available on Amazon
Okay.
and it is also on Spotify. And I have a website, www.jamie-lerner. I put out a Facebook post most days. I'm a total failure at a
No,
lot
you're
of the
not.
other platforms. Absolutely cannot keep up on Instagram. So I'm a failure and I'm okay with that. Um, but yeah, anything that you would like to know about what I do is on the website. And it's a really nice place to go for
Hmm.
information. This
Yeah.
podcast and other podcasts are on there as well. And so sometimes it could just be a resource for information, and then I will never interface with you, and that's okay.
Hmm. I'm only on Instagram as well because I feel like I'm a rebel and maybe a hipster about social media as well. I just feel like, and maybe you feel like this as well. Like my time is so precious and I'm always trying to be very present in what I do. So it's like, I want to be able to give just enough to this one thing. I don't need to be everywhere and all the places. And I think in our society, they push that constantly. If you do anything in the public eye, it's like, you've got to be here and there and everywhere. And before you know it, it's like you're doing more of that than actually your work and your message and your intention. So I'm with you, sister, on that.
Thank you.
You can only find me on Instagram as well, and I'm certainly okay with that. So just want to validate you there.
Thank you.
So I always end up in on the podcast just circling back, excuse me, with my guest about the gratitude that they're feeling right now in their lives, and I always want to see what 3 things you're grateful for. This week, this moment, this year, anything sort of that's in your heart center at the moment.
I am so grateful right now for my health. Very grateful. I am so grateful for my connection with myself that will never be anything but 100%. And I am so grateful for people like you who are really walking the talk and getting their message out there, because I think that is our responsibility as helping professionals to be the example that we are trying to share with others. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jamie. I loved your story. I loved everything about you. I loved your self-confidence and your self-assuredness. I loved the fact that your parents gave you so much space to cultivate who you are as a person. I mean, I think the world would be a very different place, and women for sure, because I think one of the things that still needs to change is us, putting on so much muck on women when they start out. We don't have the same entry point as men when we come into this world, and we kind of have to reverse engineer our life in a way that doesn't make sense to society right now in a lot of spaces. So I just think if the world had been full of a lot of Jamies, it might look a lot different.
But I think there's more. I think there's more of us.
Yes, there's more of us, definitely.
That is super exciting.
It is. It is. We're all waking up, and there's in differing degrees, and there's a lot of women who are choosing to do this work in the same vein, and it's so important, and it's such an example. And I'm glad that I get to bring women like you that are powerhouses in their own right to this show, and to be able to be that shining example. So thank you again, Jamie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Chris Iziomata, in alignment with Light Casting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.